to Deep Sleep Stories. If these stories have helped you through restless nights, please leave a review. Reviews are what help this podcast grow, reach more listeners, and stay alive. Without them, even something meaningful can slowly disappear. So if this show has brought you comfort, that small act truly helps keep it going. Now, settle in, and let's begin. Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories, a quiet place where your mind can soften and your body can rest. And tonight you'll drift along a lighthouse garden walk where moonlight, salt air, and gentle blooms guide you towards sleep. Beneath you, steady, supportive, already beneath you, steady, supportive, already holding all your weight so you don't have to. Allow your jaw to unclench. Let your tongue rest. Let your eyelids become heavier in the most natural way. Imagine the night air is cool and clean, edged with the faintest touch of sea salt. Somewhere, far beyond whatever room you're in, waves are rolling toward shore in a patient rhythm, and each wave is like a slow breath your body remembers how to take. Breathe in, gently and deeply, as if you're sipping calm. Pause for a soft moment, then breathe out as if you're setting down something you no longer need to carry. Again, a slow inhale, quietly filling your chest, your ribs, your belly, and a slow exhale, letting the day slide away from you like sand through open fingers. In your mind, you begin to sense a path. Not a path you must hurry along, but a path that waits for you, lantern lit and kind. A lighthouse stands somewhere ahead, and beside it there's a garden that blooms in the dark with peaceful velvety color. The walk will be unhurried. Nothing will demand your attention. You'll only follow the gentle invitations of light, fragrance, and the calm, steady hush of the sea. And as you listen, you can let the story carry you the way a tide carries a small, smooth stone, easy, effortless, and safe. The lighthouse had been standing for so long that it seemed less like a building and more like a natural part of the coastline, as though the cliffs had decided to lift a pale tower into the sky. Its paint was the color of quiet moonlight, softened by mist and time. The lantern room at the top glowed with a steady turning beam, an unhurried circle of light that moved across sea and shore as calmly as a slow hand smoothing a blanket. Below the lighthouse, the land sloped into a garden sheltered from the strongest wind by low stone walls and thick hedges. It was an unusual garden grown with patience and a kind of gentle wisdom. The plants there did not fight the salt air. They welcomed it. Leaves gleamed faintly with brine, and blossoms nodded as if they were listening to the waves. A gate rested at the garden's edge. It was made of iron shaped into curling vines, and if anyone looked closely, they could see tiny metal flowers and small birds perched along the top rail. The gate never creaked in complaint. It only opened in a smooth, quiet way, like a thought drifting into a dream. Brought them here the way streams brought them here, the way streams eventually find the sea. Cloak wrapped close against the coolness, The traveler paused before the gate and looked up at the lighthouse beam as it swept across the darkness. The light did not glare, it did not demand. It moved with a calm authority, saying in its own language that the world could be navigated gently, that safety could be steady and quiet. The traveler placed a hand on the gate. The iron was cool, but not unpleasant. It held the chill of the night like a polished stone holds the memory of water. With the slightest pressure, the gate opened, and the traveler stepped onto the path. It was a simple path at first, packed earth softened by moss, bordered by stones rounded with age. Small lanterns hung from shepherd's hooks along the sides, each lantern holding a warm, low flame. Their light was amber and soothing, a color that belonged to fireplaces and honey and the last moments of evening tea. As the traveler walked, the garden seemed to breathe around them. The wind slipped through leaves with a whispering sound like pages turning slowly. Somewhere, a night bird made a soft call, 2 notes, then silence, and beneath it all, the ocean's hush continued, deep and constant, like the heartbeat of the coast. The first section of the walk was lined with rosemary and lavender. The rosemary was sturdy and fragrant, its needles releasing their scent with the faintest brush of passing air. The lavender was darker than it looked in daylight, each flower spike a velvety shadow, with a sweet perfume that made the traveler's thoughts drift slower like boats easing into harbor. The traveler's steps naturally matched the rhythm of the waves. There was no reason to do otherwise. The path asked for a slow pace, and the traveler listened. Farther along, the garden opened into a small courtyard of pale stone. In the center sat a shallow fountain. Water rose in a low, gentle curve and fell back with a soft, repeating sound. Not a splash, but a quiet patter, as if the water were applauding in the gentlest way possible. Around the fountain grew moonflowers, their blossoms open wide to the night. They looked like folded silk unfurling, petals catching every hint of light. Some blossoms were pure white, others creamy, with the faintest blush at the center, like the inside of a seashell. Moths drifted above them, silent and unhurried, and the traveler watched them for a while, soothed by their floating, aimless grace. The courtyard had a bench, smooth wood worn by time and softened by sea air. The traveler sat, letting the cloak fall open a little, letting the shoulders drop. The fountain's sound became a lullaby, all on its own. One piece the color of dusk rose. They one piece the color of dusk rose. They looked like tiny captured horizons. The traveler lifted one piece, turning it slowly in the lantern light. It was cool and silky against the fingertips, and it seemed to hold an old story of waves and patience, of sharp edges softened into gentleness. After a time, without deciding, without effort, the traveler stood and continued along the garden walk. The next stretch of path ran close to the cliff's edge, though the stones and shrubs formed a safe boundary. Here the ocean felt nearer, and the air tasted more strongly of salt. The lighthouse beam swept across the water, and when it passed over the traveler, the world briefly brightened, then returned to shadow. It felt like being noticed kindly, then left in peace. Along this edge grew low plants with thick leaves, succulents that stored water like little reservoirs of calm. There were also clusters of sea thrift, their round blooms a muted pink, and tufts of grass that bowed and rose with the wind as if practicing slow, thoughtful movements. The traveler moved beneath an archway formed by two leaning stone pillars. Vines climbed the pillars and small pale blossoms dotted the leaves. As the traveler passed under the arch, the air changed slightly, warmer, more sheltered. The sound of the waves softened, as if the garden were pulling the sea's voice into a gentler register. Beyond the arch, the path entered a part of the garden that felt almost enchanted, though nothing sparkled in a loud way. It was more like the enchantment of a quiet room, or the hush that falls over a forest when snow begins to drift down. Here the plants grew taller, ferns unfurled like slow green hands. Hosta leaves spread wide, holding beads of dew that caught lantern light like tiny, patient stars. A few small trees leaned inward, their branches forming a canopy, and from those branches hung soft lanterns made of paper and thin wood. Their glow was dimmer than before, as if the garden itself were encouraging sleep. The traveler noticed with a small sense of wonder that the lanterns did not flicker in the breeze. Their flames remained steady, sheltered by an unseen gentleness. It made everything feel safe and cared for, as though the night had been tidied and arranged into comfort. In this shaded place, a narrow stream ran alongside the path. It was fed by a spring farther up the hillside, and it murmured over smooth stones with a sound like whispering. The water carried the faint scent of mint, and indeed mint grew along its edges, leaves bright and fresh even at night. The traveler crouched and dipped fingers into the stream. The water was cold and clear, and when the traveler lifted a hand, droplets clung like tiny jewels. They fell slowly, one by one, back into the stream, each drop joining the flow without fuss. The traveler watched that simple return, and something inside them loosened, as though their own thoughts were learning how to let go and rejoin the calm current of the world. A little farther on, the path widened into a circular space where stones were set into the ground. Like a mosaic, the stones were pale and dark, arranged in a spiral pattern that drew the eye inward. In the center of the spiral was a flat rock, smooth as a table, and upon it sat a ceramic pot filled with soil. A small plant grew there, just a few leaves, tender and brave, the kind of plant someone might call a beginning. Beside the pot lay a small watering can, and next to that a folded cloth. There was no note, no instruction, yet the scene carried a quiet invitation. Not an obligation, never that, but an invitation to tend something gently, even if only in the mind. The traveler lifted the watering can. It was already filled, surprisingly warm, as though it held water that had been resting near a hearth. The traveler tipped it slightly and a thin stream flowed into the pot, darkening the soil. The young plant trembled, not from fear, but from the delicate touch of water on its roots, as if it were waking into comfort. As the traveler set the watering can down, the air seemed to settle more deeply around the spiral. The lantern light softened. The stream's whisper became almost a purr. The traveler's breath grew slower, deeper, as if the whole garden were guiding the body into rest. Leaving the spiral, the traveler followed the path as it curved uphill. The lighthouse tower grew larger between branches. Its windows were dark, except for the lantern room, and the beam continued its slow, constant sweep. The traveler could hear now a faint hum from the lighthouse itself, not a loud sound, but a gentle vibration, like a distant cello string. It was the sound of the mechanism turning the light, steady and sure. On the hillside, the plants changed again. Here grew shrubs with glossy leaves and small white blossoms that smelled faintly of vanilla and rain. There were also clusters of hydrangea, their blooms heavy and cloud-like, colored in dusky blues and soft purples. In the lantern light, the hydrangeas looked like pockets of twilight that had settled into petals. A stone wall bordered this part of the path. The stones were stacked neatly, and in the cracks between them grew tiny flowers and bits of moss. The wall held warmth from the day, releasing it slowly into the night, and the traveler found it comforting to walk beside something that still remembered sunlight. At a bend in the path, the traveler came upon a small door set into the hillside. It was made of wood, rounded at the top, and a brass handle gleamed softly. The door looked as if it belonged to a storybook. Beside it, a lantern hung from a hook, and beneath the lantern was a little shelf, holding a cup and a small kettle. The traveler stood quietly. The door did not open. Nothing moved, but the scent of chamomile drifted from somewhere, warm and soothing, as if the air itself were offering a bedtime drink. The traveler lifted the kettle. It was warm, and when the traveler poured into the cup, steam rose in a soft spiral. The traveler took a sip. The tea was mild and sweet, with a hint of honey and a whisper of sea salt, an unusual combination that somehow tasted like comfort and memory, like the feeling of being wrapped in a blanket while listening to rain. The traveler lingered there until the cup was empty. Then the cup was placed back on the shelf, and the traveler continued toward the lighthouse. Soon the path leveled out, and the traveler found themselves in the lighthouse garden proper, the place that seemed to gather all the quiet magic of the coast into one sheltered embrace. The garden here was arranged in gentle terraces. Stone steps led up and down between beds of flowers and herbs. Each terrace had a different mood, as if each one held a different kind of calm. On the lowest terrace grew soft grasses and white clover, a place that looked like it would feel cool and springy under bare feet. There were also small white daisies, their centers pale gold in the lantern light. The traveler imagined lying there looking up at the sky, letting the lighthouse beam pass overhead like a slow, protective glance. On the next terrace grew taller flowers, foxglove their bell-shaped blossoms speckled inside like tiny constellations. The foxglove stood like quiet sentries, elegant and still. Nearby there were clusters of pale blue flowers that seemed to glow faintly, as if they held moonlight in their petals. On another terrace grew herbs in neat rows: thyme, sage, lemon balm. The scents mingled into a gentle perfume that made the air feel healing. Even the act of breathing felt like resting. At the center of the terraces was a circular path of smooth stones. The traveler stepped onto it and began to walk the circle slowly. With each step, the mind seemed to quiet further, like a candle flame settling after a breeze passes. As the traveler walked, they noticed small signs tucked near certain plants, simple wooden plaques with words carved into them. The words were not instructions. They were reminders, like small, kind thoughts left for anyone who might wander here. One sign near the rosemary read, "Remember what is steady." Another near the lavender read, "Let the small sweetness be enough." A sign near the stream read, "Return, return, return." The traveler smiled softly at that one because it felt like the garden was speaking the language of rest. The circle path led eventually to a stone alcove set into a hedge. Inside the alcove was a chair made of woven reeds, and beside it a small table holding a lantern with a very low flame. The hedge around the alcove muffled the wind and softened the ocean sound until it became a gentle, distant hush. The traveler sat in the chair. It cradled the body in an easy way. The traveler's hands rested on the armrests, fingers relaxed. The lantern's flame barely moved, steady as a quiet heartbeat. Above the alcove, the sky was visible through an opening in the hedge, framed by leaves. Stars shone faintly, not sharp points, but soft glimmers, as if seen through a veil of calm. In that sheltered spot, the traveler began to feel as though time was loosening its grip. The worries of ordinary life, the small, sharp thoughts, the urgent lists, none of them seemed able to enter this hedge-framed stillness. They stayed outside, fading like footsteps in sand after the tide comes in. Somewhere nearby, a faint sound emerged, soft, rhythmic, almost like humming. The traveler listened. It was not a person humming, not exactly. It was the garden itself, the way leaves and stems and hidden insects created a gentle, living music. It rose and fell with the breeze, a lullaby made of nature's smallest motions. After a long while, the traveler stood and left the alcove. The path led toward the lighthouse door, which was set into the base of the tower. The door was painted a deep, calm blue, and a brass knocker shone like a small, resting moon. The traveler did not knock. There was no need. The door opened on its own, quietly, as if it had been expecting someone who wanted only peace. Inside, the lighthouse smelled of old wood and salt and warm oil from the lamp above. A spiral staircase rose along the wall, steps worn smooth. The traveler began to climb, one slow step at a time. The climb was not tiring. It felt like moving through layers of quiet, each step lifting the traveler into softer thoughts. As the traveler ascended, small windows appeared at intervals, offering glimpses of the sea. The ocean looked like a dark blanket stitched with faint threads of silver, where moonlight touched wave tops. Far out, the beam of the lighthouse swept across the water, and each time it passed, the horizon seemed to sigh. Lantern sat on a table, its flame low, and lantern sat on a table, its flame low and steady. The room felt like a resting place built into the lighthouse itself, a secret nook for anyone who needed to pause. The traveler ran a hand over the quilt. It was thick and soft, patterned with tiny stitched flowers and waves. On the shelf, the books looked well-loved, their spines creased. The traveler pulled one out at random and opened it. Inside were drawings of plants from the garden, lavender, rosemary, foxglove, each drawn with careful lines and gentle shading. Notes were written in the margins, in a tidy hand, not hurried, as if whoever wrote them had all the time in the world. The traveler closed the book and placed it back. Just seeing the drawings felt like being tucked in. Then the traveler continued upward, climbing until the staircase ended at the lantern room. The lantern room was circular, surrounded by glass panes. The great lamp sat in the center, shining with a bright, calm flame. Around it, the lens and mirrors turned slowly, guided by the steady mechanism below. The light moved out through the glass, sweeping the world in a protective circle. The traveler stood at the edge of the room, careful not to disturb anything. From here, the view was wide and quiet. The sea stretched out dark and endless, and the shore curved away into shadow. The garden below looked like a patchwork of soft lantern glows and darker beds of plants. The traveler watched the light turn. Each sweep felt like a breath. Light, then shadow. Light, then shadow. Nothing sudden, nothing harsh, just steady reassurance, again and again. In the lantern room, there was a small stool near a window, and the traveler sat. The glass was cool nearby, and the gentle vibration of the turning mechanism could be felt through the floor, like a calm purring. The traveler's thoughts became slower, as if they were settling into the same rhythm as the lighthouse. The mind did not need to solve anything here. The lighthouse already had its purpose. The garden already had its quiet beauty. The sea already knew how to move. The traveler only had to be. As the traveler sat, something curious happened. The light, in its slow turning, seemed to cast patterns on the floor, shapes that looked like leaves and petals and curling vines. The traveler blinked, and the patterns shifted, becoming clearer, as if the garden's iron gate designs had risen into the light itself. The patterns drifted, swirling gently around the stool, and the traveler felt a sense of being surrounded by the garden even up here, above it. It was as though the garden and lighthouse were not separate places, but one calm, connected thing. Stone and leaf, lamp and bloom, sea and soil. The traveler's eyelids grew heavy. The stool felt softer. The cool air in the lantern room felt like a clean sheet being drawn over the mind. When the traveler finally stood, It was with a quiet certainty that rest was not only allowed here, it was encouraged. The traveler descended the staircase slowly, hand on the rail, steps careful and gentle. The room with the bed waited like an open invitation. Back in that small resting room, the traveler lit the lantern just enough to soften the corners. The quilt was unfolded, the bed turned down. The traveler removed the cloak and placed it neatly on a chair. Outside the small window, the lighthouse beam continued its sweep, and its light occasionally brushed the wall, a slow, quiet, passing glow. It felt like a lullaby made of light. The traveler lay down. The mattress was firm but welcoming, and the pillow smelled faintly of lavender, as if someone had tucked dried flowers inside long ago. The quilt was pulled up, and warmth spread slowly through the traveler's body. It began at the feet, then the legs, then the hips and belly, then the chest and shoulders. The traveler's hands rested lightly on the quilt, fingers slack and peaceful. The ocean's hush reached the room through the thick walls, softened into a gentle, distant sound. The turning of the lighthouse lens became a faint hum, steady and comforting. The traveler's breathing matched those sounds, slower now, deeper. In the half-light, the traveler remembered the garden terraces, the rosemary, the lavender, the moonflowers, the spiral stones. Each memory felt like a soft place to rest the mind. The traveler did not hold any thought tightly. Each one drifted in, then drifted out, like waves washing over the shore and retreating again. Outside, the night continued its quiet work, cooling the earth, shining softly on leaves, guiding ships with the patient beam. The garden moved slightly in the breeze, nodding and whispering, carrying its calm scent upward. The traveler's eyes closed. The room felt like a small, safe shell inside the lighthouse. The world beyond could do whatever it needed to do. The traveler could simply rest. And now the story begins to soften, like lantern light, dimming as sleep draws near. The lighthouse continues its gentle turning, steady and sure. The garden remains below, quiet and blooming, holding the night in fragrant hands. The ocean breathes in long, slow rhythms, wave after wave, always returning to calm. The traveler lies warm beneath the quilt, breathing easily. Thoughts drift like sea glass in shallow water, smooth and untroubled. Nothing needs to be done. Nothing needs to be decided. Only rest, only the slow comfort of the night, only the steady, patient sweep of light. As the traveler slips deeper into sleep, the room grows quieter still, and the spaces between sounds become wide and soothing. Breath in, breath out, a softer inhale, a gentler exhale. The lighthouse watches, the garden waits, the sea sings its low hush, and you can let yourself drift the same way, carried by calm, supported by stillness, easing into quiet dreams. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.